from inside of a somewhat chilly Bill Snyder Family Stadium. Derek Young and Matt Hall from K-StateOnline after another K-State Tuesday press conference. The first thing to talk about, of course, is the topic that's really the biggest around K-State football. Been a lot of stuff written about it in recent days on our message board, on Twitter, on other sites about Bill Snyder's future. I asked Bill Snyder yesterday what his mind was about the thought of retirement. His response to me was simply it's something he'd evaluate at the end of the season like he always does. The answer he said he's given 1,000 times, which is fair enough. It's what he has said every time he's been asked that question. So no follow-up today, Derek, about that. Really just business as usual as far as what Snyder said, the players said, talking about bouncing back from the loss at Oklahoma and getting ready to head to TCU this weekend.
Yeah, really all the talk was centered on what, how they would respond to such a humiliating and what Bill Snyder called an embarrassing loss for the players against Oklahoma, and kind of trying to respond from that. Look forward to TCU, a little bit on the TCU defense today. That seemed to be a kind of a focal point of the conversation. And also something I thought, Bill Snyder kind of pointing the finger back at the coaches, himself and his staff, for probably the most he had all season.
Absolutely, and credit to him for that. I asked Zach Reuter a kind of pointed question. I asked if people question themselves after a loss like Oklahoma, if you start to wonder what kind of football player you were. He answered it and said he got some inspiration from a fellow teammate earlier this week.
Dalton yesterday, Reisner had a really great speech, and he really made us think back to what we know. And he says, hey, 2 weeks ago we just beat Oklahoma State, and well, look, they just beat number 6 Texas. I mean, let's not forget that we were feeling pretty good a week ago. We thought we were getting this thing rolling, and so he reminded us that, hey, we still have a lot in front of us, and one hiccup shouldn't define our season.
So that's what Zach Reuter had to say, and I think it's a very valuable take from him as to what they're looking at. But I want to go back to something Derek Young said before the clip. The talk about, Bill Snyder and the coaching staff perhaps looking at themselves more often than they had in the past. I got the same vibe today. I agree with you, and we're not trying to turn everything into a big story about what does it mean for Bill Snyder's future, but this is, like you said, a bit of a different tone than maybe we had heard the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, he's always kind of referenced the lack of preparation being the cause of a loss, but he especially did this for this past one against Oklahoma, and he said a lack of preparation that reflects what the coaching staff has done for that week. So he kind of took a shot at him and his fellow coaches for the performance against Oklahoma. And he also kept referencing how they need to get out of schemes that don't help out his personnel, that don't embody the personnel. He's like, why are we running schemes that don't fit our personnel, or why are we asking our players to do something that they're not capable of doing?
I will point out an inconsistency that I guess stuck with me, and I think it's worth saying. It was yesterday on the teleconference, Bill Snyder praised their preparation before Oklahoma and said that wasn't the problem. And then today he turned around, and I think what you said is accurate. He said it was the issue. So I don't know what that means, but I thought that was interesting, what changed his mind in the last day about that. We did ask Adam Holtorf, how do you balance being persistent and doing what's worked for you in the past and also knowing when to make a change? It's a tough question, but he did his best at answering it.
I think they both play into each other. I think, when maybe one thing you're not doing isn't working, you still have to stay persistent at it. I don't think it's an either-or question. Persistency always is key, and the bigger thing is how you respond to that adversity you're facing, I think, is huge. And, staying persistent at whatever you're doing, trying to find ways to improve, and if one way isn't working, maybe trying to find another way, but still staying persistent at that.
Of course, Derek, the opponent, as you said, is TCU this week. The Horned Frogs struggling much like K-State coming off a loss to Kansas last week. A pretty good defense is talked about, but a team that's really looking for itself as well, just like K-State is.
Yeah, they have no answers on the offensive side of the ball right now other than probably Jalen Rieger being a playmaker for them, even though Michael Collins has been an improvement over what Sean Robinson is producing. Their defense is still pretty good, probably not as good as they typically are, or at least not the last few weeks, but they are holding most of the teams they play under their season average. So it's going to be a challenge for K-State, I think a key, because we heard today everyone talked a little bit about the lack of effort and how it was seen on tape and it was seen during the game against Oklahoma. And if you specifically pointed out, it's because they got beat in their own heads after they got down early. So I think the key against TCU, don't get down early.
Absolutely. That would be the big question, is if TCU comes out and they do have playmakers still. They're not a top 25 level football team by any stretch, but as you mentioned, Jalen Rieger, they still have playmakers at running back, so that would be the challenge, of course, for K-State. Derek, we've talked a lot this year about must-wins, and I don't want to use that term anymore, but if your goal as a K-State fan or K-State player is to get to a bowl game, you may not have to get to 6 wins, 5 could be enough, but it is hard to picture a real path to 6 wins without winning in Fort Worth on Saturday.
Yeah, because if you're going to get to 6, you got to win 3 of the next 4. You got Iowa State and Texas Tech still looming. So TCU seems probably like the second most winnable game left on the schedule outside of the home game against KU. TCU's not a real crazy atmosphere they're walking into this weekend.
Yeah, it's typically not a great atmosphere down there in Fort Worth. We will be there, of course. We look forward to covering that for you at K-State Online. For Grant Flanders behind the camera, for Derek Young, for Matt Hall, thanks for watching K-State Online.
Tell your friends.